fact, just yesterday got to meet her for the first time, and it was just instant love and recognition and respect. And I think we're really fortunate to have such a beautiful woman for our main speaker tonight. So, welcome, Sydney.
My name is Sydney, and I'm an addict. This is like entertainment. First, I want to thank Brent and the convention committee for having me come up here. It's been such a privilege, and it has been so beautiful. When Brent called me, and I told him that I was coming up, he said that he would have two women meeting me at the airport. And I said, how will I recognize them? He described a little, with one with a little blonde hair and the other with a little darker blonde hair. And he says, how are they going to recognize you? And I'm trying to think, what am I going to wear? I hadn't figured that one out. And I said, well, I'll have a huge black purse. And I get out of customs and I walk outside, and very nonchalantly I'm like lifting and waving this big, huge black purse, and I hear, Sydney, and then I saw Jane and Sherry, and grabbed their hand, and we hugged, and I said, I'm home. This is my family. And my old man said to me, he said, do you have a place to stay there? I said, Brent said, yes, I have a place to stay. And I said, these two women are picking me up, Jane and Sherry, and he thought I was staying with them. Wait until I call him tomorrow and tell him that I'm staying in a home with 5 guys. Oh, I can't wait. Well, let me tell you something about these 5 days. First, I didn't want Jane and Sherry to leave that evening. We talked, I don't think we stopped once. I don't remember the streets, the lights, or anything, all the way over to Henry and the guy's house. And they were just beautiful, but they did have to leave. But let me tell you something about these 5 guys. So caring. They have been so loving. I've gotten to know each one of them very, very closely. And I'll tell you that for the rest of my life, I know that I have these brothers here in Vancouver. And everyone else that I have met, I feel so comfortable here. And you've all really made me feel so welcome. I want to talk about Narcotics Anonymous and share any experience, strength, and hope that I can share with you. It was back in sometime in the middle of August, 1975, when I was so wasted that I couldn't get down on my knees. I rolled out of my bed, literally, lay down on my knees, and said, God, help me. And I knew that I had hit a bottom. I didn't know that you're supposed to hit a bottom. Bottom was, I knew that I was dying. Okay, I had used drugs for 25 years. You don't see many older addicts live that long here. My drug of choice was pills. I used many other drugs, but the drug that I had to have every day were my pills. And I want to tell you where a few pills, starting off with a few pills a day, where I ended up 25 years later, was the last 5 years of my using, I was using 150 to 200 pills a day. And it was horrendous. The hell that I was going through. I had broken out into a second-degree burn 2 years before I came into the program because of the drugs and the booze. And I went, and my skin just peeled off, I got so frightened that I stopped drinking. I would do anything not to interfere with my using these drugs. You know, they say that you look into an addict's eye and you talk about the hell of what it was like, and only an addict will understand what it was like. The paranoia, I will never forget. I was legally insane. And this is all drug-induced. This is where drugs will take us, no matter what, no matter how much you use or what you use. The end result of using drugs is insanity, institutions, or death. And I will never forget the insanity. And I really believe that I was more frightened, horrified at being insane than I was of dying. I'm just going to share one of the things. When I think of it, my skin still crawls, you know, but I used to save my little bottles. I was always afraid, the paranoia, that someone would see how much I was using, so I would save them. And I had all these empty bottles. The paranoia was so strong towards the end, those last 2 weeks, that I called in a friend and was whispering around the house with the water faucet on. No one would hear. And I said, I've got to get rid of these bottles, you know. Now, she knew I was blowing my top. And in the middle of the night, I made her come at 2 o'clock in the morning. I had thousands and thousands of bottles literally piled in these huge garbage bags. And I made her drive down the driveway to the house, which was a very narrow driveway. We could hardly open up the door. Took first one bag of the pills, put it into a suitcase, couldn't close the suitcase, and dragged this thing into the car. How it got into the car this day, I will never know. Had her drive. Went over there and took out the garbage in case the police were watching. And if they were to look over the top, they'd see it was garbage and nothing else. And then throw the bags, the empty bottles, down into the bin, take the garbage and cover it up. And that is pitiful. But that's where the drugs had gotten me to. You know, I had no hope. I knew I had lost my mind. I knew I was dying. And when I fell out of bed that night and said, God, help me, a moment of clarity, I said, I knew I had to do something. I went by myself the next day, and before I went, I want you to know I had a stash of a few thousand pills, and I flushed them all down the john. I had tried detoxing. I stopped using myself before and went into convulsions, and by the way, I was convulsing even while I was using. That's how bad it had become. And I threw all these pills away, went to the hospital. I was told that there was only one hospital, that's all we had at that time, that allowed you to detox, that had a place for you to detox at. And I went over there, and in 1 hour, I had taken my last batch of pills, dumped the rest. In 1 hour, I was a raving lunatic. I was screaming, I was in pain, I was convulsing, but so frightened at the thought of giving up these drugs, and so paranoid that the whole world was out to get me at that point, that what I did, I left the hospital. I just couldn't go through with it. And a friend of mine took me into her home, and I slowly started dying those last 2 days. I will never in my life forget it. My daughter, my eldest daughter, called up the doctor. They were trying to get me back in the hospital. No longer, there was no choice anymore. I knew I had to do something. And the doctor said, she what? She threw them away? He says, immediately, he says, go down and get this prescription filled. She can convulse. Well, I was already doing it. I have absolutely no idea how 2 days later my daughter got me to the hospital. I don't remember anything. But I'll tell you what I do remember. Whether it was a day or two, I have no idea, but I woke up one day and everything is white. The entire room is white. I thought I was in heaven already. And I looked up and my daughter was there holding my hand. And I looked into her eyes and I said, oh my God, what have I done? And I'll tell you, to this day, I don't know which is worse. The bottom I hit or kicking. My first year was hell. Those first few weeks, that first month of kicking, was the most horrifying that I have ever gone through. I weighed less than 95 pounds, a little over 90. You could see the skeletal frame. I was shaking so, and by the way, I shook for 2.5 years in this program for all the drugs that I had used. I had taken 5 different drugs at a time, and I can't tell you how many I took at one time. There was just so many. And 3 of them were triple scripts, and they were all narcotics. I still get the chills when I think of it. And however, I took all these drugs, and they told me something. They said, for the rest of your life, you will not be able to take any drugs again. And I cannot tell you that I could not understand how do you live your life without drugs. It was inconceivable to me. One of the great things that they did do was that I did have to go to a meeting. I got out of all the voluntary meetings. At that time, there was only another 12-step program. Narcotics Anonymous was very, very small. In California, in my area, in Los Angeles, in my area alone, there was 1.5 meetings. And the half was because nobody went to that meeting. We had to go to another 12-step program, at least one a week. I went to that program, and after the meeting was over, I went up and I started talking about drugs, and they said, and very nicely, we're not about drugs. I really can't help you. And I'm trying to, even just talk was an effort. And he came back 5 minutes later. He said, I have someone here who has the same problem, the same disease that you have. And it was a man, a doctor who'd lost his license, who had been on drugs also. And that week, he would call me every single day at the hospital. He called me up one day and he said, they have this new little meeting that just opened up. It's Narcotics Anonymous. I said, what's that? He says, well, like AA has for booze, this is for drugs. By the way, I had not been able to speak at this. They put me first 2.5 weeks in detox, and then for 3 weeks into this rehabilitation or whatever, little recovery program that the hospital had. I could not talk. At 7 times that day, I called him back and said, I'm not going. Then I'd call back and say, I'm going. And I'd call back and say, I'm not going. Right? I'm lying out on the bed. Well, I can't even get up to take a shower, and he wants me to go to some meeting 20 miles away. And then finally something in me said, go for broke, Sidney. Right? I called him up and I said, no matter what I say, come and pick me up. And that was my introduction to Narcotics Anonymous and the greatest love affair of my life. Let me tell you something. I walked into that room and all of our area was at that meeting. 20 to 25 addicts. That was it. And I sat there, and it was really interesting. Just a few months ago, I was talking to my old man's sponsor, and I was telling him exactly who was at that meeting, what they wore, and what they said. I can't remember one thing about reading the steps. It was a 12-step meeting, because I couldn't get 2 words together in my head. I mean, clean, I was wasted. And I looked at these people, and I heard them talk about drugs, and they didn't have to substitute words. And I said, oh my God, somebody understands. how I feel and what I went through. You know, I went back to that recovery house, and for the first time the next day I spoke. And I spoke about these beautiful people. These people who knew where I had come from, knew what I was going through, knew what I had to give up, knew what I had to go through to get my drugs. And mine wasn't all legal, even though I had 7 doctors. You know, we'd go across the border to Mexico. We knew exactly where to go. And you'd stand there with all, waiting 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day with all the degradation that goes along with it. You know, you're not going to leave until you get it. And you do anything to get it. And I'll never forget that. And that was the beginning. I'm only very shortly going to go back into my past. As you know, in 3 more weeks I'll have 9 years. And I came into the program when I was 50 years old. I'm 59. And I thought that at 50 my life was over. And by all rational means it should have been over. These 9 years are very precious to me. Every moment is very, very precious. When you're that close to death, when you touch insanity, and a gift like this is given to you where you can live your life over again, and you begin to understand that I don't have to wake up anymore depressed, with impending doom, with anxieties, with fears. And I was that way for those 50 years. What a gift we have. You know, that is why I love this program. And I want you to know that for the past 6 years, I have been to nothing but NA meetings, Narcotic Anonymous meetings. And I want you to know also that recovery is possible here in Narcotics Anonymous. You know, many times you hear talking about, I want to go to another meeting, another program, so I can get more spirituality. What on earth is more spiritual than the 12 steps and the 12 traditions that this program gives us? You know. I was born in New York City, and you can tell I still have my accent, even though I lived in California for around 40 years. And came from lower middle class people, wonderful, wonderful parents, who I absolutely hated as a child. They came over, my father and mother came over from Russia. My father escaped what they call the pogroms there. The men were being sent to Siberia. Those of the Jewish faith. And 8 years later, sent for my mother. My father was a very religious man. He was what they call a chazan. A chazan is a person who sings the prayers from the Torah, and forced upon me his religion, of which I became very rebellious. And my mother was very critical and judgmental. You know, it was always, why don't you play the piano or violin the way your cousin Helen does? You know. And I had 2 cousin Helens, which really did it for me. And the other one was, why don't you get the grades that your cousin Helen gets? You know. And I was told over and over that no matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. You know, you don't honor your mother and father, you're bad, and that's all I heard. And I also heard, God is going to punish you. And what I grew up with was a vengeful God. Because of this critical and judgmental life that I was surrounded by, and this was every single day, I grew up to be very, very shy, very inadequate, no self-worth, not knowing how to do anything about it. We were never told. And that started a thing for me to start building an image, any kind of an image other than what my mother and father tried to put on me. And that image, the rest of my life, almost killed me. I'm not going to go through the next 50 years step by step. It would take years. But what I do want to get into is I want to get into the recovery of Narcotics Anonymous and the hope and the faith, and to let you know that I truly believe that no one here has to ever go out and use again. We have a program of steps and traditions and principles that promises all of us that we can live our lives without destroying. And everything I did in my life, I destroyed out there. One way or the other, no matter how beautiful or how terrible, I would end up destroying it, because that is the nature of drugs. Because when you use drugs, you have no self-worth, and when you have no self-worth, there isn't one fucking thing you're going to do to make it good for yourself or be good to yourself. I want to get into something that happened, I believe it's, 22 months ago, or 20 months ago. And talk about recovery then. In November it'll be 2 years. My 29-year-old daughter died. And I cannot tell you the love, the closeness that we had. It all happened in one day. She woke up and complained of pains in her stomach. And I got her to a hospital. And they had her there for 5 hours. And they couldn't find anything wrong. They made an appointment for the next day with a specialist. And a few hours later, she died in my arms. It was something very rare. It was a ruptured lower intestine, very rare in a girl her age. And what I want to say is the miracle, the absolute total miracle of what we have here in this program. Because if it had not been for this program, if it had not been for this loving God and for the people that God works through here, that I would not be here alive. If I was still out there using, if I didn't kill myself with drugs, I assure you that I would have killed myself immediately or fucked up so bad over drugs. I didn't really know how anyone could go through such pain and such anguish and such loss. I remember my sponsor coming over to the house, and her husband, my daughter, my son-in-law were there, my Bobby was there. And from that moment on, the house was never without addicts there. Day and night, 24 hours a day, there was someone, not someone, there were 5, 10, 15, 20 addicts in and out the house. I never left the corner. I sat in that one place. I was in such pain. I remember saying to Lily, I said, God, I've had to have 1 second of reprieve, 1 minute. I don't know how anyone can live through this pain. And all I would do, that's all that I did. God, help me. God, give me 1 moment of relief. And somehow I got through another moment. There were 2 questions that everyone asked me. One, I know that you know what they are. Do you want to use? And the other, do you still believe in a loving God? When someone had suggested to me that I use, I can't tell you how furious I was. Of course, I had a lot of anger, too, at this point. The thought, you see, something had happened. I had 7 years at this time, and I had been working and working and working on my steps, living them, because I was told that the answer to every problem the answer to every question was in the steps of Narcotics Anonymous. And more than anything else, when I tasted what it felt like to be clean and started to find the peace and the serenity that I had never had in my life, more than anything I wanted to stay around. And I began to experience love. And I realized that love, truly loving, is not destructive. You know. The mother, under the guise of love, who is selfish or abusive or thinking only of themselves, is really and truly love under the guise of love. I have found out in this program that true love does not hurt, cannot harm. That true love is unselfish. It is giving. It is thinking of another human being first before we can think of ourselves. Not our clean time, but in other ways. And of course I knew nothing about that when I came into the program. I had to learn it here. And to think, the thought that I would go out and use was so horrifying to me in terms of, is this all that my love for my daughter has meant to me? I was a victim all of my life out there. I picked up dues all of my life. If I truly loved my daughter, I did not want to go out, and she would not want me to go out and use. You know, I didn't even think of using. I know today that using drugs is no longer a solution for me. You know, my sponsor said to me, she said, you know, Sidney, we thought you were going to lose your mind when Leslie died. And I very quickly answered her. I remember we were driving in the car. And I said, God would have helped me with that too. Because I tell you that without this loving God, and that was the only thing that I had to hold on to then, which came to the second question, do you still believe in God, a loving God? And that was the only thing I had. My program is based on a belief of a loving God. And not for one moment did I believe that God would test me to see what my faith was for him by taking my daughter's life. Someone had given me a book around a month later that a rabbi had written who had lost his son, a 13-year-old boy. And in it, when I read it, what it really did was reaffirm what I already believed, that life happens. That the very thing that this world is made of, that allows us to exist on it, to live on it, like gravity. If we go up in a plane and the plane crashes, the very thing that caused that death, the gravity, is the very thing that allows us to live on this earth. And if someone gets a terrible disease, I don't... And if someone gets a terrible disease, I don't believe it is God punishing. I believe that there are certain cells, and certain cells are not well, and they cause diseases. That is life. We have a term around here, we talk about living life on life's terms. It took me a long time, actually Leslie's death, to really understand it. It took me 7 years to understand the first step. I am powerless. I am powerless over drugs. I knew that when I came in. And I had to think, while I was doing the steps, perhaps, just perhaps, if I am powerless over drugs, maybe I am powerless over people, places, and things. The essence of the first step. Let me tell you what I was so afraid of, and I understand now. What I was so afraid of was the very thing that had happened, my losing my daughter. I had no control over life. And that is why I did not want to say so freely, I am powerless over life. I am powerless over people, places, and things. Because for me it was the most frightening thing in the world to know that I had absolutely no control. Because at first when I said it, and I would say it so easily, it's so easy to be spiritual when everything is going well. You know, I would say, I'm powerless. You know, I have no control over life. But in the back of my head there was always, but, maybe, if, and all these little things. It took years to come to terms with. You know, the second step, a power high greater than myself that can restore me to sanity. It took me a long time to understand what insanity was. I want to tell you a little story about this step. A very important step. Of course, all the steps are important. This happened a few years ago. I had been walking in the park close to our home, and I saw this woman who was in our program. She was rather new, and I see her looking for something in the ground. And I went over and I said, hi, what are you looking for? I lost my keys. I said, oh, let me help you find it. Both of us get down on the ground. We're looking for the key, and we're looking, and all of a sudden I notice we're covering a pretty large area. We're still down on our knees looking, can't find it. I said, where did you lose the key? I mean, do you know exactly where you lost the key? She says, yes, I do. I said, where? She said, in my apartment. I said, what are you doing looking for it out here? She said, the light is better out here. Now, I hope this is a laughter of identification, because you tell me how that kind of thinking is more irrational than the addict that goes out and pays someone money to give them dope so they can kill themselves. And all of a sudden that little story doesn't sound that crazy, does it? Or if we come into this program and know we're going to die if we go out to use, and we still go out to use, what could be more insane? You know. Or if someone says, work your fourth step, motherfucker, or die. Right? And you look at them and say, it's only suggested. Let me tell you, you may suggest, but let me tell you what I must do. You know, I must work my steps, and I must work them in order. I must take directions because of this ego and sick pride that I have. You know, I must turn my life over to a higher power and get my will out of the way. I must do a fourth and a fifth, and for the rest of my life work on step 6 and 7 and make amends and make restitution and pray and meditate on my knees every morning and every evening, or for however long I need. I must do that if I want the promises of this program, if I even want to be in this program. The passing parade does go by. We are all here tonight, but many of us will not be here. You're damn right it's a tough program, and you hurt. But isn't it amazing how willing we are to hurt out there using, and then when we have to go through a little pain here to get recovery and peace and serenity and the promises of this program, all of a sudden rebel against pain. The second step is very important to know. What is the insanity that I am living out today? What excuse am I giving for not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? What is the rationalization, one more time, that I am giving? The third step of turning my will over. I was willing to do that with conditions. I was positive that I knew a little bit better than God what was best for me. It took me a long time to learn that God's will and my will cannot be in the same place at the same time. I swore I would never do the fourth step. And if I did the fourth, that wouldn't matter because I'd never do the fifth. And of course I did the fourth. And in the fourth, I was able to see the patterns that led me to destroy everything in my life. I was able to see my character defects. I was able to see where I must make restitution. I was able to clean up the wreckage of the past. And I heard people say, well, you could go give your fifth step to a stranger in the street. And I was told, and they used to grab us by the neck, you take your fifth step with your sponsor. They were tough, those old dope fiends, when I came into this program, and thank God they were. Let me talk about the 6th and 7th step. Those are the forgotten steps. Everyone thinks you read the 6th and 7th and you've done them. The 6th and 7th steps for me is something that I will have to work on for the rest of my life. They are the character defects that allowed everything I touched in my life to turn to destruction. And every one of these steps, they talk about some steps being steps of action. Every single one of these steps are steps of action. God will do 99% of it for you. You must do that 1%, and that 1% is monumental. If I was still praying and waiting for God to remove these character defects without doing any, I'd still be waiting. I have to change it. If I am selfish, I have to practice being unselfish. If I'm in fear, I must practice in having faith. If I am greedy, I must practice giving more. Because this is a giving program. All our lives, I know I did. I took, and I took, and I took. And I wanted, and I wanted, and I wanted. And just willing to give back, if I was willing at all, just what I had to, and nothing more. And we come here and we learn that we give. People used to say to me, well, how do you know how much to give? And I look at them and I say, how much was given to you? Give more than that. And the 8th and 9th was another one I was never going to do. Especially, just think what those people did to me. And I have to go and make restitution to them. That one scared the shit out of me. I'm telling you, I was petrified with that one. But of course, being new, or rather new by the time I was on that, I had no idea what the values were. I had no idea that when doing the 8th and 9th steps, that the beginning, and only the beginning of the promises would be shown me. But that after the 8th and 9th step, only the beginning of being able to relate to another human being without destroying. It's really amazing. We come into this program, the first thing we want is relationship. And I've got to tell you that relationships have nothing to do with recovery. We just change one obsession for another one. But we want relationships. We want to love, like you can want love. What did we know about love? Who knew about self-sacrifice? Who knew about thinking of another human being before myself? Who knew how to be honest, truly honest with another human being without hurting that person? Yeah, and yet we want it. We go after it like we really think we know what we want or how to get it. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've been in a relationship for 9 years, and we're still together. But let me tell you where that relationship is on my priority list. There is God. There is this fellowship. There are the steps of the program, the unity of the program, and giving away what was given to me. And then comes my relationship. But if I didn't have the previous things other than Bobby on the top of my priority list, I know and he knows that I would not have him. I would have no relationship. The only one, because we are not well. We get weller. We work the steps, but we are not well people coming in here. People who destroy their lives, there's got to be something. You know. The only way we can have it is for the woman to learn to be a woman, to relate to other women before they can relate to a man, to learn that I am not an extension of my old man. If he was miserable, I was miserable. You know, if we had an argument, I was miserable. If he was in a bad mood, I would take it on. Everything I did was a reaction. Just being an extension of my old man, I had to learn to be a human being in my own right. And when I was able to begin to see how not to take on, when I could have the relationships with other women, learn how to be a friend, and then the magic, and what Bobby and I have together, and we are so different, it is amazing. You know, so she's laughing, she knows. You know, what we have together is so strong. He has his program, I have my program. And that separateness, because he does not fix me and I do not fix him, that separateness is what binds us so closely together. I respect him. He makes me feel respected. I love him, and he makes me feel loved. And he doesn't do it the same way I do it. Isn't that a miracle? You know, the 10th and 11th, 12th step were the maintenance steps. The steps that have all the other previous steps in it. And by the way, if you try to work step number 12 first, before you do any of the others, I've got news, it doesn't work. It will not work. It'll get you on your ass. You know, I'm not saying that because I'm standing up here saying something. I know it just through experience. Because see, when I came in, I wanted instant recovery. I heard about instant coffee and instant meals, and I expected instant recovery. There's no such thing. How many years was I out there killing myself? The insanity to think that I could recover in a few days, a few months, a few years. You know, one of the things I wanted to say is that when Leslie died, I had this incredible void or any kind of feeling of what the future would bring. I had never lost a daughter. I had lost my parents, yet I don't think I had ever experienced such pain and anguish and loss as I did when I lost Leslie. I had one thing, and I had faith. I believed that this loving God would help me no matter what. I didn't know if the pain would ever go away. I didn't know if the sense of loss was like a big black question mark in front of me. I was told from the beginning when I came into the program, you live one day at a time. You have faith. And through the experience of living and applying the steps, the traditions, and the principles of this program, the answers will be given to you. The last few months when I was sharing, I was telling other addicts, I was saying, you know, I'm going through something, and I don't know what it is. One of the things that I became very aware of, that every time I spoke, it was excruciatingly painful, because I had to relive every moment of that pain and that loss. And something else happened after I spoke. And I was telling other addicts, I was saying, I can't articulate it yet. I don't know what is happening, but I know that there is something happening within me. It was around my 5th, 6th year that I started really working, and very specifically working my 11th step, to find out what my relationship was with this loving God. I knew God's relationship to me. I knew that He forgave me. I knew that He was not judgmental. I knew that He loved me. But what was my relationship with this loving God that I had just recently, in the past, at that time, 5, 6 years, experienced? And I didn't even know how to go about it, except I know over and over I'm told you work the steps, you work the steps. And I've got more into prayer and meditation. And I was also told that if you just search in meditation for the truth, one day the answer will be given to you. I knew that I had taken from this loving God very freely. What I knew I had to do was certain commitments, my commitment to prayers every day, of getting down to on my knees, my meditation. But beyond that, there was also a big void and a big blank. You know, what then? He's invisible. And I want you to know, in our home at the time of Leslie's death, and I'm saying this because I felt it. I felt God's presence. I felt God there in that room crying over the loss of Leslie. And I believe that no matter what, that we did have a loving God, not a punishing God. And recently, not that I can be that articulate about it, but recently I have come to know a little bit more, and it is so simple. It is so simple. I have been saying it for 9 years and barely understanding it. That what I have discovered is that the most spiritual thing that I could have in my life is simply to be able to live God's will, not mine. And I've got to tell you, it is one of the most difficult things to do, even though I can do so much of it. By practice, we do learn to do more and more of God's will. But the wisdom to understand the difference between God's will and my will. And what is wisdom other than what we learn from experience? We live the steps, apply it to our life, we make the mistakes, we learn through those mistakes, and if we're fortunate, we gain a little bit of wisdom. But the simplicity of knowing that all I have to do is to discover God's will and live God's will, and ask myself in any question that comes up, anything that comes up, any conflict, any decision, what would God want me to do? Most of the time the answer will come. If not, I may make mistakes. But by God's grace, I will find out what the answer should be. I get knocked on my ass, I know what the answer is. I need to be hit hard. I want to tell you a little dream that I had early on in my recovery. I don't know, I must have had around 2.5, 3 years. I'd been working on my 6th and 7th step, and I was positive that there were a few of those 7 deadly sins that I did not have. And avarice was one of them. I was a giving person. I had no greed. In the dream, I was walking towards a little house, a cabin. And on this side of me was standing this very, very beautiful man. And by beautiful, I'm talking about a feeling of beautiful. Never said anything to me. We walk into this house, and it's all lit up inside, and there's another man standing there. And this man standing there waiting for us said to me, I have all these gifts here for you. I want you to take anything that you want. Before I started to take anything, this man, who still was silent, who looked very peaceful and very beautiful, bends over and picks out a very simple box, a small wooden box, and he hands it to me. And I go walking along, and this other man keeps saying, oh, take anything you want, anything you want. And I'm thinking, anything? And I take, there's this gold, and I take the gold, and I open up the box. I'm so glad to be getting all this gold. I don't look at the box right. I'm putting the gold into the box. I go further down, and there are some furs. You know, I take the furs, and I don't know how it fit, but it did in a dream. It fit right into the box. Right? There's a car, the real size of a car. And I take the car, and I put it into the little box. In the meantime, I keep looking over here at this man. And he's not doing anything. I expected him to be critical, judgmental, shaking his hands, right? God is going to punish you. I heard that all my life. Doesn't say anything. I can still see his feeling for me is loving. He's walking beside me, smiling, and around I go that room, and I keep taking and taking and taking with an avarice that was incredible. And I put it all into this little box. And I run outside because I'm sure that this man is going to tell me not to. And I turn around, I'm looking at him. No reaction. He has this beautiful smile. He's looking at me. He loves me. He's not judgmental, not critical. And I look down, I'm so afraid he's going to take the box away, and I open up the box, and everything in it was gone. All I had left was this little box. And I didn't have a chance to look inside before. And as I opened it up, I look inside, and there is this beautiful, beautiful carving. And somehow in the dream I knew that one of God's children had spent a very, very long time carving this beautiful box, a gift that whoever this man was in my dreams thought was special and beautiful and precious. And as I looked inside the box and at this man, I started to feel a love and an understanding of truly what God's love for us must be. Because I felt it in the dream. I had never felt that kind of a love in my life. My daughter, my old man, whatever. You know, a promise to come. But I'll tell you where I have experienced it. I have felt it here in these rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, all over. Everywhere I go, everywhere you go, you will walk in and you are not a stranger. You are hurting and there is someone there to help. I've talked to many new people here. since I've been here. And I want you to know that recovery here at Narcotics Anonymous is possible. And all the promises that were given to us to be able to experience peace and serenity and joy in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of whatever happens out there, is such a blessing. It is such a gift. It is possible for you. Go out and kill yourselves anymore. And the hardest thing for us to learn is how to be good to ourselves. You're damn right it's hard at the beginning, and you hurt, and you're confused. And the disease is always telling you to go out and use, I'll fix you, I'll fix you. That's a disease. You hold out your hand and let the others around here who are clean, who have worked this program, take a hold of it and help you and hold on for dear life. Because I have seen addicts that have not come back. I've seen addicts on a slab. I can't tell you how many. And I believe that this program of recovery and the love that we experience, you talk about the spirit of love. And what is the spirit of love if not the spirit of God? I want to thank all of you. You have been so wonderful. I will never forget you. And I know that this can always be my home. Thank you, and God bless you.